And welcome to the Industry 4 Problem Solvers Inside the Stack series. Today, we have Fuuz. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with problem solvers, this came out of Prove It, where the idea was, why is it we don't bring vendors on here and have them why don't we do a live stream where I'm talking to OEMs who sell Industry 4 products, and I basically ask them the questions I would ask them privately, but we do it on a live stream, and then we have them do an actual demo, and I kind of pick apart what they're doing and ask questions on behalf of the customer. So that's what we're doing. So today we have Fuuz. Fuuz is actually this month's, right? They're this month's sponsor for Industry 4 Community, right, Vaughn? Is that right?
Yep.
I think so, yes. He can't talk. They were in our mastermind. They presented in mastermind last Friday. We got very, very high marks, high reviews for Fuuz's demonstration. And I went and visited their offices we met in Indiana a few months ago, and we did like a deep dive over a couple of days on their organization and tech stack and go to market and all sorts of stuff. And I made some recommendations on really nothing around the tech. And in fact, this is one of the very few OEMs where I didn't have any recommendation around the tech stack. The tech stack is rock solid. That's the reason they're here. I want everyone to see it. But I did have recommendations on kind of go to market, website, like, hey, you got to make it easier for people to get this in their hands. And also the learning curve in the very beginning. There's some, you could change some things with the menu and navigation structure. It was all that kind of stuff. It was nothing technically based. And so we've invited them to come to Problem Solvers for the community. So, all right, with that, I'm going to introduce Craig Scott and Lance Menard. Craig is the CEO and co-founder at Fuuz, and Lance is the director of engineering. He's really the chief technical officer and kind of oversees. He owns the product. He's the guy who knows the underlying architecture better than anyone else. So with that, Craig, Lance, welcome. Craig, why don't you guys do your own introductions in case I butchered my version?
Yeah, for sure. No, that's perfect. Thanks, Walker. Yeah, Craig Scott, I'm the founder and CEO here, and Lance will do his intro. We're just manufacturing guys. So I come out of about 16, 17 years of manufacturing operations, owned a tool and die shop in Detroit. So we are located here in Metro Detroit, have a lot of automotive, tier 1 automotive customers. That's kind of where we grew up. Metal stamping. I worked at a company called Plex for a while prior to Rockwell acquisition. A number of us did actually, including Lance, and then started an SI called Cumulus here in the area. So we did a lot of IT, OT integration work. Did a lot of ignition work, Boomi, Kepware, Plex deployments, and that's why we're here. We developed the Fuuz platform based on those challenges, as being an SI and dealing with all of the myriad of integrations and fragileness and all of that. So, yep, Lance.
Yeah. I'm Lance. I joined Craig about 10 years ago. We've been working together for almost a decade, Craig. If you hadn't.
Man,
didn't figure that. Yeah, I know, it's wild.
That's half of my life.
That's hey, you look great. So 10 years ago, roughly, I joined Craig. I had worked in manufacturing software for 4 years before that. And yeah, like Craig said, we did integrations and customer implementations for a couple of years there. I'm a software guy, so my responsibility was building out the extensions and the integrations and kind of ensuring that whatever we were providing was sort of filling the gaps between whatever the kind of base software could do and what a customer needed. And we found, a couple of years in, we're building a lot of the same things over and over, kind of repeating work. And we're like, well, let's build some internal tools to make our lives easier and reduce the amount of repeated work. We built out a good internal tool set, and then a couple of years after that, we're like, well, what we got is really it's a product. It's a little selfish of us to keep it to ourselves. So why don't we turn around and kind of pivot into a software product company and give other people access to the stuff that we built out. So.
All right. So what we're going to do is, for those of you who are listening on any of the podcast platforms, so this is treated as a podcast. However, normally in our podcast, we don't do screen shares. but we will be doing screen shares here. So I'm assuming Lance or Craig will show kind of a reference architecture at one point, but also they're going to be doing a demo. You're going to get to see Fuuz in practice. So you'll want to watch this on YouTube for the demo. All right, with that. So what we're going to do here is I'm basically going to be the customer, okay? And what we're going to do is give like the community insight into how it is I vet an OEM. Like if an OEM, they've called me, they've said, hey, I've got this MES. I'd like you to take a look at it. And I'm just going to go through the process that I go through when I'm looking at an OEM for the first time. The difference is I know Fuuz intimately. I actually do know it inside and out now. But you guys are going to get a chance to see this live. And then also you can ask any questions and they'll answer here at the end. So let's start with, all right, you guys have me here. What is Fuuz? I see it. First off, where did the name come from and what is it?
That's a question for Craig.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so originally we called it MFGX, which is actually the legal entity that we are. At some point we changed to Fuuz because we work with a lot of companies that don't necessarily consider themselves manufacturers. Mm-hmm. So we get into food and beverage, life sciences, right? They don't necessarily call themselves a manufacturer. You know, we work with automotive tier ones and steel mills, clearly industrial manufacturers, right?
Right.
So MFGX were really good in those, but just didn't jive with others. So that was one reason behind it, honestly. And then Fuuz, because I needed to get something that was short and roll off the tongue and that I could get the domain for. So it happened to be available and it kind of fit because we fuse everything together. I mean, that's really, I know some of the questions you're going to ask us here today, and that's going to be one of my answers is, you know, we go into these companies and we help them really take what is a giant mess of infrastructure and build it all together, right? Bring it all together, single pane of glass, you know, unify it all. So I think it kind of fit. So that's my story.
Okay. Where did Fuuz come from? So a little backstory for those of you who don't know Plex, where these guys they come from Plex. Plex was acquired. Plex is kind of MES for ERP. It's really kind of where it fit. You know, it really fits in that MES ERP. It's MES for ERP. You have two types of MES. You have MES for operations, which is it's really more operationally focused, and the integration into ERP is secondary. It's a sort of a secondary consideration, and not that it's not there. It's just it wasn't the primary focus initially. All right, the primary MES for operations is the core four: work order, scheduling, downtime tracking, OEE, mean time to repair, mean time to failure. All right. Then you have MES for ERP, where it grew out of was there's a lot of people want ERP to be the center of their universe, but that isn't where that's where financial, that general ledger and bill of material and product lifecycle management, all that kind of stuff, that's not where the business lives. The business actually lives in MES. And so what a lot of ERP systems, ERP companies realize is, our customers need a lot of things we can't provide. And so MES for ERP grows out of that. Plex fits in that category. They were MES for ERP. They were acquired by Rockwell. I know you guys aren't going to shit on Rockwell. I'm happy to do it. Rockwell did a terrible job post-acquisition, and it's a perfect case study in how Rockwell knows how to drive, technologies right off a cliff. Okay. In full disclosure, I did consult on the acquisition for Plex. I did not know that Rockwell was the buyer, but I was a market consultant on that acquisition. All right. With that, where did Fuuz come from? Right. So we know Fuuz has been around. You didn't say this, but 2017, 18, right?
2018. Yep.
2018. But where did it come from? We know what it is. Where did it come from?
Yeah, so it was born out of necessity. We were an integrator dealing with about a half a dozen or so different third-party products, trying to find our way through digital transformations back in 2015, 16. That's about the time we brought Lance on board and started to lay some code. We didn't really productize it till 2018, so we started building it around 2015 or so. And then that was Lance's point. We kind of decided, this can serve a bigger audience than what we were looking at. But yeah, that's where it came from. I mean, it was just out of necessity. we needed a better way, a more streamlined way that was less fragile to get customers onto Industry 4.0, right? I mean, they had machines that were disconnected, siloed data, siloed systems. We were working with a number of large tier ones that had multiple ERPs, multiple shop floor MESs, WMSs, maintenance applications. So we wanted to provide a pathway for them to get everything unified across the enterprise. So we came IT down. A lot of what you're going to see in the demo today is very IT, is highly secure,
starts with
scalable,
modeling,
high availability, data modeling, relational modeling. So
knowledge graphing.
That's kind of knowledge graphs.
It's very, very robust IT infrastructure.
Yeah. Very IT. We've been focused, I'd say, over the last 3 or 4 years and really building out more on the OT side with industrial connectivity, shop floor, our edge gateway, which we'll talk more about, and the architecture and that. But it was just, we were a system integrator. We needed a better way.
So it's sort of the inductive automation story where Steve Heckman, when he started inductive automation, he was an integrator. And the tools he was using, he hated the companies and he hated the tools. And he's like, what I really need is a tool that basically is a scaled platform that has a SQL backend, where basically anything I see in the platform, I could query from a SQL database. And that's where Factory PMI came from. And then that turned into Ignition. By the way, all the best products, that's the story. There was like you had a problem to solve. The market didn't solve it. You solved it yourself. And you're like, let's not be selfish. Let's take it to everybody else. So, all right, let's talk about the problem. What problem does Fuuz solve? Obviously, the answer is many problems. But if I'm interviewing an OEM, I'm going to go, hey, tell me when you first start working with a manufacturer, what are the 1, 2, or 3 top problems you're generally solving in the first iteration using Fuuz?
Well, I'm pretty involved in the sales process, as you can imagine. I get involved in the discovery and answering some of those questions. And I'll say there's a few things that people typically will come to us for. One is they need some kind of operation system. They're looking for MES, or they're looking for a way to manage their warehouse or distribution center. So they're looking for that operation, that layer 3 piece. So we oftentimes fall into that category. They also are coming to us when they have recognized or identified that they have a data problem across the enterprise. So when they have a lot of different sites that are siloed, not talking to each other, they've tried to implement data lakes or, some kind of solution. It just hasn't panned out. And they're trying to figure out, how do I move data from the edge into some, unified container, right? So they're trying all these things. They're orchestrating data, doing data operations. So that's another big one. The third one is we get a lot of IT teams coming to us, and especially at the C level, looking to consolidate their IT footprint. So when they have a lot of applications across the enterprise, they're looking at the platform capabilities of Fuuz and how they can use that to extend existing applications and make them better. We have a ton of customers that have Ignition, right, at the plant side. And so they can put Fuuz in to help them, orchestrate rolling that out across the enterprise and get a single pane of glass. So those are the big problems we're solving.
Okay. And you guys go to market a lot with ERP, right? Isn't that your entry point is in a lot of cases is a manufacturer is doing a new ERP implementation, and the ERP company, whoever it is saying the customer needs some MES functions that we can't provide, and we're recommending we do Fuuz. Now you guys will see in the demo why it is, if you were an ERP company, you'd want Fuuz to be your partner. It just has to do with the way that they handle data modeling in the back end. It's basically an ORM. So it's a blank. It starts out with essentially a blank canvas, and it has very, very powerful data orchestration and modeling capabilities under the hood, which lead to both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional relationships across your data. If you want to be able to scale across an enterprise, your MES, this is probably the hardest thing to do. It's very easy to do MES on a production line. It's very hard to do it across an entire business. Having an elegant way of managing two-dimensional, so hierarchical relationships, and three-dimensional graphing relationships, so ones that go horizontally across the semantics, is very, very difficult. That's kind of where Fuuz's strength is. However, when the ERP companies recommends you, what functions are the customer asking for that they're recommending you be the solution to?
Yeah, generally it's always at layer 3. So we're doing MES and warehouse management very often. So we have a couple of direct OE relationships with the ERP vendors, and then we have a lot of indirect. So we'll work with their resellers, we'll work with other IT consulting firms that will bring us in to solve certain problems. Integrating it into the enterprise is another one. There's this IT term of iPaaS, integration platform as a service. That's sort of how we started out. So we have a ton of pre-built connectors for all the enterprise systems like PLM, ERP, EDI, all the IT mumbo jumbo, right? So that's where we get pegged a lot. A lot of companies are looking at a new ERP system, and then they're finding out that, wow, to make this work, I need like 8 to 10 additional bolt-ons when you're a manufacturer. So they can bring Fuuz in, and it's just ERP and Fuuz, and it's just way simpler.
Okay. All right. How does it solve the problem? So here, what I want to understand is technically, so where does Fuuz live? Okay. And I happen to know that it's tenant based. So you spin up a tenant for a client, or you spin up a tenant for each location for a client. And then how does it connect to the plant? So how does it solve the problem? So 3 steps: where does it live? How does it connect to the plant? And then how do you build stuff in Fuuz? And then we'll get into the demo from there.
I feel like Lance is great at
transition. Yeah. So our customers are primarily hosted in our what we call kind of a public cloud, but it's a shared tenancy infrastructure hosted in AWS. So Fuuz is a cloud native solution. So that gives us.
Do you guys use Cloudflare on the front end?
No,
no outages.
No.
Yeah. So yesterday we were supposed to record a podcast yesterday with these guys, do a pre-recording, and because I don't know if you guys noticed the Cloudflare outage, ChatGPT, like everything but Gemini was down, plus X was down, like our podcast platforms were all down because of the Cloudflare outage.
It's been a rough couple of weeks between Cloudflare and then Azure and AWS before that. Yeah, it's been
no joke.
It's been.
Do you want me to share this architecture diagram?
Yeah. Go ahead and pull
that
that up.
My screen.
Yeah, I can talk over that.
Hopefully
so that cloud hosting gives us all of the IT benefits of high availability, horizontal scalability. It means the solutions can be accessible anywhere in the world if they need to be.
Hey Vaughn, show that screen. Yep, there you go. Thank you.
There we go. So that's the top half of this diagram, right? That's the cloud. One of the things that we're currently wrapping up work on and are really excited to announce kind of formally at Prove It coming up is kind of an on-prem deployment of this, or a private cloud deployment, a customer hosted solution. So for those of you who hear cloud and immediately think, well, that's not going to work, it's okay. We're working on it.
How will you, Lance, let me ask you, I don't mean to derail you, but now the advantage of cloud is every single customer is working on the same version of Fuuz, right? I mean, when you guys push an update, it goes to everyone, and everyone's on the most recent version, right? How will you manage that when you go to on-prem? Will that be how will you handle that?
There are probably going to be a couple answers depending on the specific license agreement and sort of SLA agreements. So typically it's I think the answer will be similar to what we do with the device gateway, where we have a version support window that is the current version plus 3 back, I think is how it works. And within that support window, any issues you have, you come to us, we'll help you. Anything older than that, the first thing we're going to ask you about is updating, right? So I imagine the support agreement will work like that. I mean, the fact is, right, with most software solutions, folks are typically not going to want to update unless they absolutely have to. That's just a fact of life.
Don't fix something that's not broken.
Yep. So, I'm a strong proponent of the fact that in the cloud, you're always running the latest platform version. We're handling the patch management, right? We're making sure that all of the updates go seamlessly, and that we're always handling any security vulnerabilities, right? We're constantly doing security vulnerability audits, supply chain audits, and patching issues, and then making sure that those get applied immediately. So all of those versions will be available to our on-prem customers. Obviously, we can't and aren't going to force people to apply updates, but we'll have to just encourage as best we can to follow a good kind of patch management procedure. So that's one of the challenges of on-prem software for sure. Fundamentally, in the cloud, the solution is already a microservice architecture in Docker. It's in containers. So we're just bringing that architecture to kind of a private cloud deployment. So it'll still be containerized, deployed in Docker. So
the brains and the bulk and everything that sits in the app running in the cloud. So if I'm 4.0 solutions, I would have basically 4.0 solutions dot Fuuz dot app.
Yep.
Right. And that's where the brains of my MES system would be running. And then I have a gateway that I'm deploying onto a software gateway that I'm putting in each of my plants that I am then certifying a connection into the cloud with, right?
Yep, exactly right. So exactly. So let's, looking at the bottom half of this diagram here, that's the connection to the plant, right? So we have a device gateway. Like you mentioned, it's a software gateway. So it's available as a Windows service, Linux executable, or Docker container. And that provides that secure bidirectional connection to the cloud. And then, where you deploy that in your network decides, of course, what it is allowed to connect to within your plant, right?
And does the app act as an orchestrator? So is the brain, so if I'm in 4.0 solutions.fuuz.app, am I able to orchestrate my gateways from there, or do I have to remote into my individual gateways to do my configurations? Or is it a combination of both?
That's exactly. You have the option to do either, but most of our customers, the only thing they ever do with the gateway is install it and then sign in and authenticate, get it connected to the cloud. And then after that, all of the administration typically happens from the cloud side, and that's automatically synced down to the gateway. So you can configure, device connectivity, test it, configure your edge flows, screens, test those, all from the context of that cloud solution, which means that you can do that if you're working from home, or if you're offsite, you can still kind of take a look at the current state of things and make changes. So,
all right, perfect. Let me real quick before we get into the demo. I was going to ask at the end, how does pricing work? Obviously, everybody always wants to know how much everything costs. Since this is cloud based, how much it costs an end user is going to be a function of how much it costs you, because you're paying hosting costs to AWS. How does that work? How does pricing work in general, Craig?
Yeah. So presently we're kind of an unlimited usage based solution, right? And we price it per site. So generally we'll go into an operation, look at how many sites are going to be running on the platform, and then it scales based on how many connections essentially we need to make. So how many ERPs, PLMs, how many shop floor devices, and then that's kind of how it scales from there. On-premise,
so you're basically trying to loosely calculate what your load is going to be in the cloud.
And then it's extremely generous. We don't want our customers to have like data anxiety or transaction anxiety, right? Just use the hell out of the platform, and Lance and his team takes care of all of the infrastructure and DevOps. I mean, we auto scale it. You just use it. You just create solutions and solve problems. That's all we want our customers to worry about.
Nobody likes getting nobody likes getting usage-based bills ever, right? Nobody likes to surprise overage.
You can't calculate total cost of ownership if it's usage-based.
Exactly.
I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
we don't want to put a meter on the side of your factory and all that stuff. That doesn't help manufacturers become better. That just makes them more anxious to use the software.
Yep. And a lot of times it encourages you to architect for cost minimization rather than the optimal solution, right?
Correct.
So,
Yeah. This is the thing that drives me crazy about cloud-based providers. I understand the challenges. Yeah. If you're hosting in AWS or Azure, you incur massive costs. Like you have to, and your pricing has to be if your costs are variable, then you have to either encapsulate, you have to charge your customers something that covers for all the variability, or you got to charge based on variability, right? So, but one of the things that just has always driven me crazy about the pricing models is you don't want to disincentivize your customer to do two things. Don't disincentivize them to use it less. So you want to incentivize them to use it more. You want more connections, more users, more. You want to incentivize using more, and you don't want to disincentivize optimal. You want to make sure they're architecting optimally. So, all right, with that demo. So what are we going to be seeing today? Is Lance going to do the demo, or is it going to be Craig?
I think it's going to be Craig. I'm going to throw him under the bus.
Yeah.
And what are we going to be seeing today?
So what I'm going to do is kind of maybe a two-part demo. So I'm going to go through, a day in the life of a developer using the platform. What does it look like to actually work with the dev tools that we offer? And then I'll show you some end user kind of functionality, maybe an HMI or something like that would be in the like MES sphere of what we do. So I will gladly share my.
And while you're bringing this up, I was actually this morning I was doing consulting with for an end user. So I've been doing a consulting thing for an end user for the last couple of months, and we were having we had 3 of our DTMA meetings this morning. I have 2 more rounds of meetings, one with their director of IT and then one with their business development group to go over their CRM, make recommendations on pivoting away from the current CRM they're using. And one of the questions this morning was, this was with the digital manufacturing group, and they don't have MES, so they have everything but MES. And one of the questions that their director asked me was, do we need an MES? And I'm like, well, yes, and yeah, absolutely. And he was like, and I said, you really have 3 options. I said, option number 1 is you could just build your MES from scratch. You could do that. You have the team internally who could build your MES from scratch. They have a great, incredible team. Number 2, they're getting ready to go to an Ignition architecture. They're getting ready to pivot from ThingWorx to Ignition. And I said, number 2, you could build MES inside of Ignition. But actually, I think Fuuz, you are right for Fuuz. So, and by the way, it's the first time I've recommended Fuuz directly to an end user. And I said, you guys are kind of prototype for these guys because you have the team internally who's going to be able to learn how to work with the platform, because everyone will agree, because this is a very powerful enterprise-based, enterprise-focused platform, that not that it doesn't work for one plant, but really the real power here in the underlying architecture is enterprise scalability. I mean, that's obviously its real power. Their learning curve is pretty steep initially. You guys are currently working on that piece, but you're not just jumping in and building something with Fuuz on day one. Like you have to model your business first and then model your assets, and you basically build out that underlying infrastructure. But I told them, I said, I think you guys Fuuz is probably the right MES for you. And he said, well, you don't have to convince me. He said, you have to convince my leadership. How do we kind of averse to MES. And I said, well, all I would say to your board of directors is, listen, it's like you guys went to a dance. You've gone to a dance, and there's a lady you're supposed to be dancing with, and she's MES. She's manufacturing execution system. And for the last 5 years, you've been building this digital infrastructure, and you've been dancing all around her. You know what I mean? You've been dancing with all the girls around her, but you just haven't danced with her yet. And she's the one you're supposed to be dancing with. That's, and Fuuz is probably the best approach for you guys, honestly. And it literally was the first time said Fuuz is my number 1 choice for you guys. You guys kind of are the prototype for what Fuuz does. So anyway, that was my little story about how I how do I make recommendations on which platforms people should be using? Where these guys really work is, they're an enterprise manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
Their processes are pretty uniform across their facilities, but they have needs for 2D and 3D relationship building, and they need the really powerful ORM in their MES, which is your ORM is obviously going to be second to none. So with that, hey, Vaughn, will you go ahead and bring up Craig's screen here? All right, perfect.
All right, so we'll jump in. So what we're looking at here is I have obviously full access and control, right? So we have a role-based access policy system here. So out of the box, users, authentication, traceability, event logging, data change history, like all of those things that an enterprise is looking for. They want governance over the data, who's accessing the data, when, where, from where. All of those things are native out of the box. So any application that I come in here and develop, whether it's MES, some frontline worker screen, put paper on glass, build a quality control module, CMMS, whatever I build out in Fuuz, inherently it adapts all of these things to it. So user control, role-based access, IP restriction, all of that, right? Full API, open architecture, everything I build in Fuuz is automatically available through our API. So there's no writing or creating custom APIs to gain accessibility to anything within our platform.
Because everything is essentially an object. Well, not essentially. Everything is an object in Fuuz, and every object is inheriting from some root class that already exists in the platform, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
And so a lot of the stuff that we struggled with as an integrator was we had to build all of this out, right? We had to support the requirements of IT. So when we were putting in shop floor solutions, we had to, think about how are we going to implement security. So we just set up a SQL server. We're, provisioning some models. Like, how do I secure all of this? We take care of all of that for you, and everything is configurable in the platform. So you can build roles, you can create access controls, but as a developer, I don't even need to worry about this. I just build the solution, and it all comes for free. On the left-hand side, we've got our navigation. So these are different roles that have been assigned to me. And then each of these roles has kind of their own specific, life cycle, right? Or journey, things that I can do with those. So as a developer, I can go into all the developer tools, which are the designers, right? So we have our application designer that kind of branches off into building screens, doing data flows, designing your schema, and then we have documents. So things like barcode labels, packing slips, work order travelers, all that's done in the document designer. So we're going to take a quick look at each one of these as we go through. Walker, as you pointed out, we use a Mongo backend, but we have a very custom ORM layer on top of Mongo, and then we've put GraphQL on top of that. So it's very flexible and extensible. And then I'll get into some of the apps too. So we do offer what we call application accelerators. So when we go into a company that's interested in MES, we install the MES accelerator. So that has all of the core MES functionality, right? The core 4 we always talk about is already pre-baked. And that's usually, 80% of what we need. And then we can just go in and add that last mile for those customers. So and then we can hand over the keys to the kingdom. We are a multi-tenant, so the public cloud is a multi-tenancy, so we're able to spread our costs across many, many customers, which is why it's still pretty competitive from that perspective. And then within my environment, I have my own multi-tenancy, so I can segregate and isolate individual factories. This is a very flexible concept, so some of our customers will create different tenants for production lines. I might have 5 production lines in one factory. Those could be 5 different tenants. So you have data isolation, user isolation.
What drives that? So when you're talking to a customer and you're trying to decide the tenant is going to be at the plant level, or maybe I just have one tenant for the entire enterprise, like how do you decide what conversations do you have with an end user to decide how to break up the tenants?
Yeah, it's exactly what Craig was just saying, right? It's primarily data isolation. So those tenants have their own data models. So the data models can diverge if necessary, and the data sets are segregated. So if you have cases where those production lines need sort of overlapping data, if that makes sense, that might be a case. The other common trigger is data access, right? Access control. It's really easy to turn on and off access for users to
At the tenant
tenants.
level.
Yep, and it's a very clear. If you don't have access to that tenant, you cannot do anything.
Well,
Obviously, you can configure permissions within a tenant, but it's a very clear cut and easy to understand way to grant and remove access. So.
Let me ask you this. So let's say
Mhm.
tier 1 automotive, like that's a big one. You guys are in Michigan. That's a big. So I've been to lots of facilities that are, tier 1 suppliers where they've got a gas division, they've got an emissions division, and they've got an electrical division.
Mhm.
And so you've got your manufacturing fuel injectors, you're manufacturing fuel pumps, you're manufacturing ceramic discs for catalytic converters, and you're manufacturing wiring harnesses for steering columns, right? So I've got four unique manufacturing processes, but at the same site, right?
Mhm.
They're on a campus, 3 different plants, 4 different processes. Am I going to have 4 different are you going to recommend that fuel injection be its own tenant, fuel pump be its own tenant, ceramic be its own tenant, and wiring be its own tenant?
Not necessarily.
Okay, what would drive the decision making?
Yeah, I
Just
guess what
for
we
the
would
end
do
user.
is so what we would do is we would talk to the business and try to understand like what are their policies. I mean, if I have, operators that are flexible, that are moving about, right,
Across
or across,
divisions. Okay.
it may not make sense to isolate things. And it also depends on how mature the operations are. So
Mhm.
we go into several facilities like OEMs all the time that are running multiple MES systems in one plant floor, right? They've got one MES running one line. And so they're used to that type of architecture. So we might just be consistent with kind of what the team is used to.
Okay.
A lot of our implementations, though, your example, we would often do in a single tenant. So anything that's within 4 walls, we would just consider that one tenant, generally speaking,
Okay.
and then
Good.
deploy that application.
Yep.
General rule, inside 4 walls is a tenant.
Usually, yeah,
Yep.
80% of the
Rule of
time,
thumb.
right?
Yep.
General rule of thumb.
Yeah, and you get the benefit, of course, then of having all that data being in one tenant makes it, really seamless to do, reporting across the entire facility and all the nice benefits there. So.
Yep.
Okay.
You get the, I mean, that was a lot of talk really to say like I know the red versus blue data models, right? So the whole concept of like relational models at the enterprise layer that are highly governed, secure,
Standardized.
normalized,
Yep.
and then at the site level or the AKA Fuuz tenant level, we can inherit some or all of that red model, and then we can extend it with whatever is unique to that site.
Perfect.
So it's both, right? I think that's and it's just a conversation to really understand how unique are these different sites, how much governance are you trying to do, what's already in the site. We do a lot of brownfield deployments, so what's already there. If you already have blue models taken care of at the edge, then maybe we don't need to worry about that in Fuuz. Is that cool?
Perfect. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Real quick. Hey, Lance, do you want to answer Shabir's question? You want to explain the tech stack real quick before we continue with the demo?
Oh, you bet. How long do I have? It's essentially a MERN stack. So we use MongoDB as our data backend. We use technically Fastify, but it's a variation of Express as our web servers for all of our Node.js services, microservice architecture, horizontally scalable. And then it's a React front end. Although, as you'll see, you never actually write Node.js or React when you're doing application development in the platform. You can write JavaScript as a scripting language if you want to. And then we use also important component RabbitMQ. A lot of the backend of the platform is event driven. So RabbitMQ is a really heavily utilized piece. So.
And RabbitMQ, for those of you who are not familiar, is AMQP. So it's broker technology, but the underlying tech is AMQP. So it's got a lot of extendable feature. It's browsable. It is queryable. AMQP is queryable, browsable, and you have methods on topics.
Yep. So this here is getting in a little bit to the GraphQL layer. So this is our API tree browser, right? So similar concept to what we've all seen in MQTT brokers, right? Or like in a UNS concept, but this is master data that I'm actually looking at. So I'm able to browse through all of the master data that we have in my Fuuz application. This happens to be an MES. This information might be coming in from an ERP system, SCADA, PLM, whatever we happen to have connected to the platform. And then I can browse through it. So if I want to do that in kind of a no-code mindset, I can do that. I can navigate all the way down through the graph, all the way down through the tree, right? It just goes infinite layers deep, depending on how I've defined my data structures. We have then going into the application designer. So I'm still in a day in the life of a developer. So this is the application designer. On the left-hand side, I have my navigation panel here. So what you're actually looking at is a list of the module groups that I've created for my application. So when I started this application, I thought about, how are people going to use this? Who's going to be accessing it? And how do I want to, create little silos of functionality for end users? So these are module groups. As you'll see here, we have like materials management, production management. Within each of these, we have modules. So advanced production scheduling, customer management. And these are the types of things that are automatically embedded or installed when you use our MES accelerator, right? So I'm not building all of this from scratch, but I could. And we do have customers that may prefer to start from scratch. So I drill into customer management. And within that customer management module, I can see all of the data models. So I have a customer with customer address. You can see everything is relational, right? And then I have my data flows that are part of that module. So I have a sales order web flow. And then what user interface have I designed for part of that module? I can see what things are in draft mode, right? So that's the little draft mode icon here. And I can create new things in here. So if I wanted to add a new data model, I can just hit the button, create a new data model. What we're looking at in the middle is an actual flow. So this one happens to be kind of off the cuff here, but this is a flow that generates Confluence documents, right? So, we use Atlassian for our development. This flow actually looks at the application and then creates all the Confluence documentation about this MES application for me. So we have a Confluence connector. This flow analyzes the data models and creates all the documentation. So just to show you one way that we use the data flow tool is to move data in motion, but also to deal with data that might be at rest in any one of these data models.
You want to respond to, it looks like Node-RED? You want to give the technical response to why it looks like Node-RED?
Yeah. Node-RED and our flow designer both follow a paradigm called flow-based programming, which is this nodes and links approach. We didn't invent it. Node-RED didn't invent it. We are not using Node-RED. This is all proprietary software. Not that, Node-RED is a good product for what it does. They do some great things. But it is not Node-RED.
But the concept is the same, and it's the same development concept, which is why they look the same.
Yep.
Exactly. And early on, we did, we evaluated whether we wanted to just use Node-RED, but we found that the horizontal scalability that we needed in kind of our cloud backend, we couldn't get through just kind of white labeling Node-RED. So,
but because Node-RED never considers. Horizontal scale was never even a consideration for Node-RED.
Exactly. Yep. So,
yep.
But yeah, the paradigm is called flow-based programming. If you're curious, you can look it up.
Yep. Yeah, and this was kind of an idea that we had earlier on because I'm not a technical guy, right? I'm a manufacturing engineer. So the idea for me every time going into like my vision module, right, and looking at my project and seeing a wall of Python hit me in the face was overwhelming, right? So I wanted something that I could just look at and understand what's going on visually, and that I could explain this to other power users. And so that was the reason why we decided to go with this flow-based programming concept. We use JSONata as our primary like transformation language in here. We've extended, I don't know, hundreds of customized bindings, Lance, in Fuuz only, to really make that language very powerful in here. You can also write JavaScript, and we're working on some other things, but a lot of pre-built nodes in the right-hand side here in my toolbox. You'll see we have a ton of integration nodes. So we have pre-built connectors for pretty much every enterprise system that's out there. And then we always have the handy dandy HTTP fallback, right? If we don't have something. If I go back to my toolbox, we also have like our device gateway nodes. So that gives us the ability to read and write from that device gateway once that's installed on premise. We do support 3 different types of flows. This one here that we're looking at is a backend flow. This one runs obviously server side in the cloud. We also support edge flows. So I can write a flow like this in the cloud and deploy it to the edge. So it will run locally on my Fuuz gateway with or without internet connection. So if you needed to do machine-to-machine communication, or you have a SCADA and you don't want to lose any of that, you need that high availability, you can do that as well. And then web flows are a front end or client side driven flow that you can do any type of user facing workflow. Releasing batches in a lab, CFR 11, all of those things that you want to build in digital sign-offs, you can build a web flow for that, and then capture all of that information, validate things, and it's all stored and persisted in our database. So a lot of this has been retooled. I think, Walker, since you saw it last, a lot of this discoverability and navigation, Lance has been working.
It was one of my first recommendations. I actually wrote a demo that kind of showed the navigation that I would recommend that would make it easier to. And so when you showed it Friday, I'm like, yes, all right, rocking.
It's this is actually my first time using this. This just came out in our build environment. But I think it's awesome. Like, it's just so much easier to navigate. Everything is right in front of my face, so I can, just find all my data models. Boom.
And beforehand, for those of you who are wondering, beforehand, the breadcrumb at the top was how navigation was done.
This up here, which is
and it's still there. It's just there's a different navigational structure now.
Yep. Yeah. So I love it. And I really appreciate Lance putting the time in to make it happen. So, and then we can jump over to schema, right? So this is why we're all here, because we all love schema. We all love talking about data modeling. So this is still the application designer, right? Nothing's really changed. It's still the same on the left, but now I'm in this schema design mode where I'm interacting with the Mongo backend right now. So this is an asset table where I would store all of my assets, right? So it's an asset data model, and you can see all the different attributes for the asset. If there's an attribute that I don't have, I can add the attribute here. So this is where you can get into that red versus blue, right? So I can extend this model as a developer. I can also, we do support what we call custom fields, which is kind of interesting because everything's kind of custom, but custom fields actually allow the end users to extend existing data models. So without having like developer capabilities, if they just needed to add, I just want to add a new attribute to this asset model for a particular sensor. I don't want to go back to IT. I don't want to bother my controls guy. They can just do that. And it doesn't require any change to the underlying application. And then this is where we start talking about why relations, right? So, assets have states, right? What's the status, or maybe what's the parent asset? So if I'm going to have, a bill of material. So I have a crane, and that's my parent asset, and that parent asset has many child assets, right? So the motors, the controls, and I can build all of that out in this data model and represent that virtual space, just like it is in physical. And this allows me to create one-to-many, many-to-many relationships without having to directly interact with Mongo. And I can just drag and drop to create relations here in Fuuz. And these are all respected by our GraphQL layer. So that's what gives you that graph data model behind the scenes. And then all the APIs are auto-generated. You still have a ton of controls as a developer. So one thing that we really focused on here, a lot of low-no code tools are, AKA brick walls, right? You get to a certain point, you can't go beyond that. And that's something that, Lance and the guys have done a really nice job of kind of obfuscating all of the really like high end, like developer kind of stuff into advanced panels here. So I can write triggers, I can create my own indexes, and I can do all of that kind of stuff anywhere throughout the platform. So there's nothing where you ever hit a brick wall.
So real quick, I think there's an important point here where you were talking about the APIs are auto-generated.
Yes.
So do you want to explain a little bit, when you're talking about API, you're talking about the GraphQL API, right? For the schema. So, or not just the GraphQL API, but do you want to explain why that's important? So for people who are not familiar with GraphQL APIs, do you want to explain why that's so important that the API is auto-generated?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to GraphQL and to an auto-generated API based on your data model, right? You get complete adherence to the data model. All of the validation criteria you set up in this data model, any, whether the field's required, you can set specific field validations. All of that is enforced at the API layer automatically. The API structure, GraphQL uses a graph structure, so that exactly matches your data model as modeled. So you're not going to have, often if you manually implement APIs, you miss things, right? Or somebody adds a new field to the underlying SQL schema, they forget to put it in the API layer, right? That never happens in Fuuz. And with the way GraphQL works, that schema is queryable actually in a couple layers, right? You could query the data model definitions, but you can also query the GraphQL schema. So as Craig might show at some point in our, well, you can see here, right? But we can use that queryable schema to provide visual tools that let you build GraphQL queries under the hood. That's all this is doing. And then within our API Explorer, for example, all of the documentation is auto-generated as well. So you can browse that documentation, you can search it, look for fields with the same names, or read the descriptions and kind of hopefully get a feel for what somebody meant when they named a field, what they did, or when they put it in there. Tons of benefits.
So one of the real powers of GraphQL for most people to understand is that GraphQL gives you the ability to browse the infrastructure. It gives you the ability to browse the structure itself. So as opposed to like SQL query language, where I have to know, I have to go look at the table and go, okay, I'm going to select, everyone always starts with select star from whatever, return everything, try to work your way through it. GraphQL gives you the ability to query the infrastructure, browse the infrastructure first before you decide what it is you're going to query from the infrastructure.
And building a GraphQL query, if you've never used one before, it's a very simple query language, and the shape of the query exactly matches the shape of the data you get out. So it's really easy to understand what it is you're asking for and what it's going to look like when you get it back, which is not true for either SQL queries or REST APIs.
And in most cases with GraphQL, you have to write the GraphQL API after you've built the backend. What they're auto-generating the API. So there's an entire step that has been taken out because Fuuz builds the API for you.
And you can also write your own. So we do have an API Explorer. You can go and create your own GraphQL endpoint and give it a name and save it. One thing I didn't point out was that the data flow that we were looking at before that looked like Node-RED is also an API that you can call externally. So all data flows are APIs. You can also turn any data flow into an MCP tool. So you can just enable it as an MCP tool.
I was gonna ask you at the end. I was gonna say, tell me what you're doing with MCP. But I'm glad that you're
we can talk more about it at the end too. So this is like really slick. Our team uses this. Our partners use this all the time, right? So I built the data model. I defined these relationships, and now I need to get some value to my customer. I need to get something out on the shop floor that they can start using. So this is our screen designer. So I can start cobbling a screen together, manually dragging elements out and all of that, or I can just browse the data as Lance was talking about. So I can drill down through the entire infrastructure here. This is just the GraphQL API that was auto-generated for that asset data model we were looking at. And this will generate the user interface for me in a matter of seconds. So I now have all of my filters. I have my CRUD actions. I have my table. I can save this. And immediately in any web browser, my end users can start creating and maintaining assets. So that's from, structured data model to end user application in under 60 seconds in Fuuz. Would probably take a week in most other tools. At least that was our experience. So this is where a platform like this, with all of these tools naturally embedded and unified, adds a ton of value for our customers. I can manipulate this. So if I wanted to add some custom stuff here, right? And again, everything is drag and drop, point and click. There's a lot of configuration. You can do some CSS stuff in here under the advanced section if you want to get carried away. This is built on top of that React framework that we use. So these screens are built to be responsive. So I can run these on pretty much any type of device, right? These are all just, Flowbox type containers. So similar to some of the other more modern technologies out there that we're seeing. So we will have customers that'll build HMIs, running them on tablets, or warehouse management solutions where we need a handheld scanner. We need somebody to scan license plates or barcodes to move things from bin to bin, or do directed picking and put away and all that. It's all done in the same tool set. So
all right, two questions before we get into the the viewer questions.
Yep.
Number one, if anybody's got any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm going to answer Ahmed's question here in a second. But number one, when organizations are first getting started with Fuuz, what do they struggle with the most? So what is the part where when they're calling you or calling your team, Lance, and they're needing development support, and they're like, I don't know how to do X, or I'm struggling to do Y. What is the part that they're struggling with the most? Not your team, but there's obviously a tier one team that they're calling.
So I mean, just to get into a little bit of the sausage that Craig mentioned a second ago, the flex layout in this screen designer, that's a fantastic option. And you can build responsive screens using it, but it does mean I don't know if you're familiar with web design, but flex layout is not the most intuitive thing for a non-web developer user. Perhaps unsurprising number of people kind of struggle with that, which is why we've got a development task on the roadmap to provide other layout options in here that are a little bit more like absolute position or kind of grid based, that are not, they won't be probably as responsive, but they will certainly be a little bit easier to just get things to go where you want them and stay there.
So for those of you in not into web development, a fundamental core in flex design is you basically create a layout, and and then elements go in places in the layout, and then depending upon where they are in the layout, when you're resizing the screen, it responds in a very predictable way. However, most people don't understand how to get the layouts right, so that it responds in the way you want it to respond.
And that just goes back to a lot of the learning curve of the platform goes back to, again, the genesis of it being an internal tool. Same thing Craig mentioned with the we were always
Yeah,
focused on
you can
capability
tell
first.
this was
Yeah. Yep.
you could tell this was built by power users for power users.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not hard to tell that this is
there's a lot.
That's originally it's Genesis. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, when developers are working with it, when they rave about Fuuz, not the end user, but the developer. So not the customer themselves. I mean, obviously you can build enterprise class SCADA, and there's basically nothing you can build in here, and you can go as horizontally and vertically scaled as you want. Okay. At the end of the day, it's about turning data into decisions. And Fuuz is perfect for that at the MES layer. What do the developers rave about? So when the developers are working with Fuuz and now they're 6 months in, and Lance or Craig, you guys give them a call and go, what do you love the most about Fuuz? What is the thing they rave about?
Usually quite a lot, which is usually quite rewarding. What Craig just demonstrated, right? The ability to go from a data model to user interface in a matter of minutes. People absolutely love that. And the fact that those things are kind of tied together and you can really quickly iterate. A lot of our users kind of from the development side are our partners, right? So they actually have sometimes teams of people working on applications. And the fact that all of the governance for the applications is also built into the platform. So all of these components are versioned, deployable. The whole application as a whole is kind of bundled, deployed, versioned. So, as they're building out complex applications with a team of people, we've tried to build capabilities into the platform to handle the software development lifecycle, so that, again, that's kind of part of the platform experience. As you even as a customer, as you grow your team and you've got a group of people working on something and you want a little more structure, that's another thing that comes up a lot.
And then
I could go on.
Sorry, and then MCP.
No. Yep.
So, so one part is enabling model context protocol, enabling tools that agents can interact with. The second part is connecting the agent to the tool. How do you connect an agent to an MCP tool in Fuuz?
Yeah, so as Craig mentioned, any of those data flows can be configured to. This is in closed beta currently. We've got a few security tweaks that we want to play to make security less optional before we release this general availability. But
yeah, for those of you that don't know, when Anthropic created Model Context Protocol, security was not at the forefront of their mind. Function absolutely was. And so the way that they handle security is, well, now they've advanced the spec, but when they originally handled the security, it was have the agent spin up the MCP server when it needs to use it, and then close it when it doesn't need to use it. Basically, was the limits of security in the early days. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So you can enable these as an MCP tool, and then we have an MCP server. So it's customer.fuuz.app, or sorry, api.customer.fuuz.app/MCP. And this
using STDIO or
HTTP based tools. Yep. And
Perfect.
So then these are available and callable. As you can see, you can configure input and output schemas, which is important to kind of make sure those models understand what it is that they should be putting in or getting out of that tool. And then that data flow can do any of the capabilities of the platform. So that's great and a little scary, right? Which is a big part of the reason why our focus is on, I would call it AI enablement, right? We want to make sure that we're giving our customers and our partners the tools to build AI tools and connect the applications that they have to AI agents when they want to and where they want to, right? Rather than rolling these things out as like platform-wide features that are difficult to control, or so this kind of pushes the control back into the hands of the people who are. That is a big data flow. Oh, this is the screen generator. I see. Yep. Yeah, Craig likes to talk about this one.
Yeah, I love to talk about this in the context of MCP because it really serves two purposes for our platform. One is obviously getting data, right, and looking at data and finding patterns, right, and reporting on that. That's a clear, obvious use case given the way we've modeled our schema. But the other really, I think, for me and our partners, big use case is like this flow that we have, which could be an MCP tool I could enable, generates user interface in Fuuz. So just like I did that manually, I clicked through, I selected that data model and built that screen in a few seconds. You can have flows in Fuuz that generate data models, generate screens, and even generate other data flows. So you can use that MCP tool to essentially build applications on our platform with your.
So as the ingress, the
Yes.
ingress instruction to a flow.
Yep.
Real quick. So Renato asked, do you guys allow custom JavaScript widgets to be imported into your front end model?
We don't allow direct JavaScript widgets. We do have a screen element for an embed frame that has security limitations that come with kind of web frames in terms of interaction between the two. But you can embed, snippets of other sites or snippets of HTML as long as there's, kind of satisfies the security requirements there. But
what's the reason that you wouldn't support custom JavaScript widgets?
The the screen definitions, and really this is true for everything in the application. It's everything that we build is JSON. So the entire state of the application that you built up is all serializable JSON objects, which makes it, I mean, it's got a lot of benefits, right? Easy to query, easy to parse, easy to generate for AI tools, and it's really easy to package up and move around.
Makes it open, completely open.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So but what that means is that we can't just take like React code and easily plug it in. Not to say we never will like add support for embeddable kind of snippets of code. We might someday. But typically what we're focused on is adding new elements to the elements panel on the right here, the toolbox. So
what's the process for getting a widget developed? So obviously that means you're developing the widgets. What is the process for a customer to get a custom widget developed?
Yeah, I mean, it typically starts with a support ticket with a feature request. And those things kind of make their way into our development backlog. Obviously, that'll get prioritized based on kind of how important that is to the customer project, right? Is it a nice to have, or is it a like showstopper? But typically, these elements are not. It's not a long development lifecycle on these. And one of the things we haven't talked about at all is environments, but our build environments, which is where typically the active app development happens. Those get nightly updates from our development branch, which means we put that together, we do our internal testing and validation, we merge it, and the next day you can start playing around with it on a build environment and making sure that it satisfies your needs and start building an app on it. And then when it goes to production in the next monthly release, then you can roll it out. So we try to shorten that life cycle of getting it into people's hands.
Ahmed Zafan, direct question to Walker: can this be an equal to Edge plus Ignition plus Highbyte plus Broker Stack, especially since it's more easier to manage? So the answer is yes, depending upon what you're trying to achieve, right? So if my focus is MES for ERP, then you could wholly replace that stack. What you would lose is really advanced OT connectivity, because obviously your connectivity is going to be limited to the connectors that are available in the gateway, and you're obviously going to lose some connectors going with that architecture. But if your focus is MES for ERP, you could replace. The much better answer is it's plus. So Edge plus Ignition plus Highbyte and a broker with Fuuz bolted on. In fact, Dylan Dufresne and I have talked about this a couple of times now. It isn't either or with Fuuz. It's what you have plus Fuuz. It's the typical Industry 4 stack plus Fuuz. Think about it as Fuuz is, instead of being a layer directly underneath ERP in the stack, it's actually a sibling to ERP called MES for ERP bolted on your stack. That's really, MES is not MES is not MES, right? I mean, this really is an ERP focused MES. That doesn't mean all capabilities in manufacturing execution can be built in Fuuz, but why it's important to do this distinction, that if you want to get the most out of the relationship between manufacturing execution and your ERP system than you want in MES for ERP, which Fuuz falls into that category. And then how do you overcome concerns like latency, internet dependency, and security being a cloud-based platform?
Good question. And
that's going to come up. It's going to come up with every client. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes. So the device gateway does a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to things like latency and internet dependency, right? Anything that is interacted but with kind of on the shop floor that needs, real time or near real time data, right? That'll be delivered by that device gateway. The same is kind of true with that internet dependency, right? You can provide some failover or fallback capabilities through that device gateway. There is always that kind of further challenge with that internet connection, right? You've always got some level of dependency there. The upside of being a cloud platform is, when you talk about things like security, I would argue that a cloud solution where we have
more secure,
right? We have a team of people. We have
more secure,
quite an extensive, security apparatus. We're being audited annually. We do penetration tests, right? I think you get a lot more on the security front as a result of that than you would if you were kind of hosting something just on a server in your network and kind of, hoping, So I think on that front, we actually maybe gain some points being a cloud solution. And as Craig
mentioned, cloud is a misconception that cloud is less secure than on-prem. It is a misconception. Mm-hmm. In fact, there is a very easy argument for why on-prem is less secure, and that is on-prem you only fix what's broken.
Mm-hmm.
Patches. Yep. If you look at the patch cycle on-prem, it is a much longer window than it is in the cloud.
Yep.
So you are always on the most recent patch. You are always, hyper focused on security in cloud infrastructure. Also, there are so many layers of security in the cloud, as opposed to in general on the plant floor. You go DMZ, VLAN, exposure.
Yep.
All right, Craig, one last question before we call it a day, which is this.
Yep.
Actually, it's the same question for both of you. So obviously this is a platform that was originally to solve your own problems, right? Craig, what are you the most proud of? Like when you look at what your team has built in Fuuz, what is the thing where, obviously at some point this never existed. It was built out of the ether. What is the thing about Fuuz, the feature about Fuuz that you specifically are the most proud of? You're like, yeah, this is awesome that we did this.
Oh man, that's like a trick.
And you can only pick one. Pick one.
I don't know. I mean, I think obviously the data modeling capabilities are huge, right? So I wasn't sure if you were going product focused, but I would say the thing I'm most proud of here is our culture, to be honest with you. Like, even more so than the product, I think a lot of the reason why our customers like working with us and our partners has more to do with the culture than even the product. So that's actually my answer.
I will say this. I mean, you guys brought me in and I was pretty, everybody knows if they work with me, I point out like, I just say, I don't think about people's feelings and I just say whatever. And, when I pointed out some things specifically just about, like, again, there were no technical criticisms. And I think they really expected me to criticize it technically. I mean, but after looking at the architecture, we're like, there's nothing wrong here with there's nothing I would change about how this is built. It's actually quite brilliant. But for me, it was, hey, wow. You clearly don't have 10-year-olds doing your unit testing and your functional testing because this is the learning curve. There's a hurdle you got to jump, right? And we talked a lot about that piece. And what really stood out about your culture was that I work with a lot of customers where when I start saying the quiet part out loud, people get very uncomfortable. And the lower they are in the totem pole, the more they're looking around. And you can really tell a culture based on how many people interact with the quiet part out loud without first looking at their boss. So if they look at their boss for like approval to go ahead and tell the truth, then you know that's not a very problem solving centric culture. If they just start talking, and I told the story, I had you guys bring on, I said, I want to talk to somebody who, it works in your services group, who I want to talk to just like a developer. And you guys brought a kid on on Zoom, or I don't know, he's a young man, adult, former Ignition developer. And I asked him, hey, what do you love the most about this? What do you think is the most impressive feature in Fuuz? I knew what I thought it was already based on how I looked at it. And I wanted to see if he would say the same thing. And he said what Craig pointed out. The data modeling capabilities, the data orchestration capabilities, like they barely scratched the surface in the demo. Is an absolute game changer in the ability to create standardized and ad hoc relationships between entities in the schema is next level. Okay, it really is next level. And it is the difference between being able to build an enterprise scale homogenously and heterogeneously, homogeneous, standardized, heterogeneous, custom, and not being able to do that. Okay. So spot on, Craig, on the culture piece. I agree with you 100%. Lance, for you, since obviously you're in charge, you own product, what is the part that you're the most proud of?
From a pure technologist perspective, I mean, the GraphQL ORM layer is, I think, the most technically impressive part of our code base. The orchestration engine, the part that runs the data flows, is also pretty impressive. It's a pretty good capability. But the GraphQL ORM layer is, I think that's the piece of sort of proprietary code that really obviously makes the whole rest of the system work, right? And we're still investing in adding new capabilities to the GraphQL API layer to simplify managing relationships and provide new capabilities in terms of aggregation queries to get quick reports and stuff like that. And the fact that it's a standardized API layer means that we add new features and they just show up everywhere.
Yeah, this is the biggest. Here's the biggest thing here, and this is getting into the technical weeds. So, because of the way Fuuz is built, the strict adherence to the original design principles, right, which you just pointed out, makes it so that the conversion of API method into MCP tool without overlapping result sets that could lead to agent hallucination, right? We're getting into the technical weeds here, is seamless in Fuuz, where it requires massive amounts of refactoring for standard software applications. And what I mean here is, if I just want to go from a REST API method, if I want to go from a method to a tool in MCP, one of the things that I had, and an agent's going to reason which tools to use to meet the objective. What you can't have is the result set from any two tools overlap. So you can't have, because that can create hallucinations for the agent. The agent, if you have two OEE calculations coming back and neither of them have unit of measure, and one of them is weekly and one of them is hourly, the agent doesn't know that the two OEE calculations that came back, one was for the week and one was for the hour. And so if you ask it the OEE, it's not going to give you either of those numbers. It's going to hallucinate and make up a third number. And once an agent starts hallucinating, you don't get it makes it next to impossible for the agent to meet the objective, whatever instruction you gave it, the thing you wanted it to do. Fuuz is designed and with a strict adherence to these design principles that made going from API to MCP tool a seamless process. And so you guys were able to deliver that so much. I mean, it's crazy. We're talking about MCP over the summer, you know what I mean? And now it's just a toggle enable MCP tool, and you guys are already in closed beta on it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? For the whole platform. The whole platform. You know what I mean? stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not only for the whole platform, but everything that's connected to the platform as well, right? Because every enterprise system you integrate with Fuuz becomes another tool in your tool belt. Every industrial asset on your shop floor that we're connected to through our gateway. So that's really where the power, that's why we went the MCP route, because we wanted to enable that for an entire enterprise.
Awesome. All right. Last question. If an integrator wants to get a hold of you to partner, hey, I want to take Fuuz to my clients, or an end user wants to kick the tires, how do they get a hold of you guys?
Just call Lance. I'm going to post his number in the chat. And,
I probably won't answer.
No.
You have to leave a voicemail.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on we are working on a trial edition. So we are looking for folks that want to be part of that. So please go to our website, send us a request. We will add you to the growing list of folks that want to be part of that. Yeah, I mean, that's the best way. Or call Walker. I'll put his number in the chat as well. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that would be I'd be changing my number quickly.
That'd be something.
I'd be changing it quickly.
Yeah.
All right, with that, Craig, Lance, thank you guys. If you guys want to know more about Fuuz, you can go to, is it Fuuz.app? Is that
Fuuz.com is the
yes. Well, Fuuz.com.
Fuuz.com and Fuuz.app is the tenant. So Fuuz.com, FUUZ.com. Craig, Lance, thanks for joining us. Everybody, like, subscribe,
Anytime.
comment down below, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.